morning, everybody. We begin with a warning that parts of England may face a drought in August, with crisis talks due to be held today about conserving our water supplies. Another heatwave is forecast for the weekend and beyond. The most common type of drought, a meteorological drought, is usually defined as 3 weeks with less than 1/3 of the normal level of rainfall. A hydrological drought is more unusual and more severe. That's when several consecutive seasons of unusually dry weather leave water levels in rivers and reservoirs low. The best known and worst hydrological drought was from 1975 to 1976, when 2 dry winters were followed by a very hot, dry summer. So what's going to happen this time? Sadia standing by for us at Brent Reservoir, which is in northwest London, for us this morning. Hello to you. Looks plenty of water there just at the moment, but there are concerns, Sadia. Good morning.
Good morning, Kay. Yeah, there is plenty of water here, and actually this morning we've had a light drizzle, so it is quite deceiving, but this is all about hot weather forecast for the weeks coming ahead, not currently. And I have to say that the entire country isn't in widespread drought, but that most of England, except for parts of the northwest of England, are in what is called a state of prolonged dry weather, and that is the stage just before drought is declared. It's not unprecedented in this country. The last time we had a drought was in 2018, but you mentioned that drought from 1975 to 1976. I think we can show you some pictures now on what it looked like. That was, of course, as you said, a hydrological drought, which comes when there is when there are consecutive seasons of unusual weather, and you can probably see from that footage that how dry and cracked that earth was. And that is what's prompted this crisis meeting today, where there's going to be discussions on how to better protect water resources as that forecast is predicted. OK, thank you. Well, in California, thousands of people have been told to stay away from their homes as the state's largest wildfire this year continues to burn. Joe Pike is in Mariposa in California and sent this eyewitness report.
It appears apocalyptic. The largest, fastest, most ferocious fire in California this year. This devastation is not unusual. Here, states of emergency are an annual occurrence, but every year the fires are intensifying. More than 17,000 acres of land has been destroyed, an area more than half the size of Paris, as well as vehicles and homes. 94-year-old Ruth Clark packed up and left her home within 10 minutes. She's been living in her car for 4 days.
Could see it was getting bad with the planes overhead roaring around like a war zone. So I said to my partner, let's get the 2 cats and get the heck out of here. I had no time to feel sorry, to be fearful. All I knew is I had to move fast.
Daryl Coleman struggled to get out quite as fast because he refused to leave his 21 dogs behind. How have you felt over the last 3 days?
Overwhelmed, a lot of stress. Converting my vehicle into to carry all my dogs, because there's more dogs on the bottom, not just on the top, they're on the bottom too.
Long before you see what has happened here, you can smell it. The ash blowing through the air, the trees still smoking and smouldering, and then you see the site of devastation, of the fire that has ripped through this area, leaving a charred car park of burnt-out quad bikes and sports cars and tractors. These metal skeletons are all that remain, and everywhere you look, evidence of the intensity of the heat. As over 6,000 residents are evacuated out, 3,000 firefighters have been deployed in. They are battling to contain the oak fire, yet just 16% of it is under control. A long drought, parched vegetation and the changing climate have proved a potent combination. And this is only the beginning of a wildfire season that could wreak havoc here for months. Joe Pike, Sky News, Mariposa, California.
Meantime, plenty of people hot under the collar last night to be precise, when it came to the latest Tory leadership debates. It was pretty fiery. There was some allegations of mansplaining, I should say. And on the other side of the debate, suggestions that people couldn't get their numbers right. Here we go.
Your own economic advisor has said that your plans would mean that interest rates would have to go up to around 7%. So just think what that means for all of your mortgages. Everyone watching, right?
Can you let me respond?
That would be thousands of pounds. Why do you want to cause
let me
misery
respond?
Absolutely. Let's
you were talking about putting up taxes. I don't believe this negative, declinist language.
It's your own economic advisor, Liz. It's not mine. It's your own advisor.
I have lots of economists that are backing my plans. Everybody thinks that putting up taxes at this moment is going to hurt the economy.
Do you know what mortgage rates are in the US at the moment? Do you want to use them as an example? Their mortgage rates are almost 50% higher than mortgage rates in this country because they're borrowing so much.
I'm sorry, this
Canada.
is scaremongering.
Canada actually has
Project Fear.
Liz, I remember the referendum campaign. I remember the referendum campaign, and there were only one of us who was on the side of Remain and Project Fear, and it was you, not me.
Okay.
And you talk
maybe
about
I've
this.
learnt from that.
I think you should be honest with people about the trade-offs involved. Because your proposals would mean that we get this short-term sugar rush of unfunded borrowed tax cuts, but that would be followed by the crash of higher prices and higher mortgage rates, and that is not something that I want to cause for anyone here.
Rishi, you've just put in the highest tax rate for 70 years. How on earth can you claim that that's going to drive economic growth? And where have the growth policies been for the past 2.5 years?
As far as you're concerned, Boris Johnson is not part of the future.
I'm sure he will have a role, I'm sure he will be vocal, but he will not be part of the government.
Lots to chew over from the debate in our new segment, Polling Pit Stop, where we take a closer look at the Tory leadership race with pollsters and commentators. As you can see, former President of YouGov, Peter Kellner, is with us now. Your snap view to start with?
My snap view is that Rishi Sunak had the better arguments and Liz Truss had the better presentation. I think a lot of people would have been put off by the interruptions from Sunak. But the poll we had immediately after the debates by opinion by my former YouGov colleague Chris Curtis, who used the system I think I first developed for UK back in 2010 in the leadership debates, getting a quick response. That's had them tied amongst the audience, having 39-38, nothing in it.
Let's have a quick look at that, shall we? Sorry, 39 Sunak, wasn't it?
39 Sunak, 38 Liz Truss.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've got the graphic then showing it broken down by party, but Conservative viewers were more in favour of Liz Truss and Labour voters were more in favour of Rishi Sunak. And, of course, they're trying to appeal to... We've got that
as well, actually, yep. So Sunak was 38%, Truss 47%.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's amongst Tory voters.
Yeah.
There we go, the Conservative voters. Now, these are Conservative voters, not Conservative Party members, but I would expect the response of Tory Party members to be not dissimilar to that. And in any event, Rishi Sunak, starting 20 points or so behind, he really needed to wipe the floor with Liz Truss last night. Kay, think of it as a soccer match. Coming into last night's contest, Liz Truss was sort of 2-0 up halfway through the second half. She played defence, which you would if you're defending a 2-goal lead. Rishi Sunak needed to play attack. He did play attack, but I don't think he scored any goals.
Park the bosses, I think, as Liverpool used to say. What about who they're actually speaking to? Are they, when they're doing these debates, are they talking to Tory party voters or are they talking to all of us?
I think they're actually talking both to Tory party members, the people who have the votes, but they also want to get a favourable public reaction, because if that poll by opinion had shown either Truss miles ahead or Sunak miles ahead, that would have helped their campaign. That would have given them momentum. It would have given them an argument to put to the members about who can appeal out there, because after all, having won the leadership, they then got to go and win or fight the next general election. So they're after both targets. OK,
opinion research over the weekend, I think it was, if you were forced to choose a PM between Sir Keir Starmer and Liz Truss, who would they pick? It was close.
It was close. Have a look at these. If it was Liz Truss, 1 point behind Labour, 39 against 40. Remember, the underlying Labour lead is around 6, 7, 8 percentage points. So Liz Truss closes that gap if we have a look at the Keir Starmer versus Rishi Sunak, we find that the gap goes up. There you are, 42-36. A 6-point lead, very similar to the general opinion poll lead. So on these figures, Rishi Sunak does not close the gap on Labour, and Liz Truss does close the gap. And there was another poll yesterday by Redfield and Wilson, very, very slightly different question, very similar figures. In other words, Rishi Sunak was hoping to go into the this final stage of the campaign showing that he is a vote winner with the general public. Before Christmas, Kay, Opinion did some research for me, published by The Guardian, which showed that Sunak was absolutely a vote winner and Truss was absolutely a vote loser. That has changed. Why? That's gone. Well, because before Christmas, we'd not had Partygate, we'd not had all the stuff about Rishi Sunak's wife being a non-dom on his tax affairs, we'd not had all the big tax rises that came in the spring. So Sunak was pristine. People knew him as the guy who gave away money through the pandemic. This spring, this February, March, April, were pretty grim for him. He's not really recovered from that. Maybe a little, but not sufficiently.
OK, given where we are today, if they had to fill in their ballot papers today, we would have another female Prime Minister tomorrow. We would have another female Prime Minister. But, you know, Kay, after last night, your debate next week, I think could be absolutely critical. Because, again, Truss needs to play defence. Rishi Sunak needs to play attack again. But unlike last night, he needs to score goals. Yeah, he also needs to calm down. Absolutely. OK, for now, thanks very much indeed. Much appreciated. That's our polling pit stop for you this morning. Tomorrow's 2-minute take in just a second. But you mentioned our debate. Just a reminder, Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss will go head-to-head in a live televised debate here on Sky News. I'm going to be hosting the programme on Thursday, the 4th of August. That's at 8 p.m. As Peter was saying, hopefully you'll be watching at home. I'm sure you would. If you'd like to be with us in the studio, then you can. And probably you've got a question as well. Please apply via the link on the Sky News app and also the Sky News website. It'd be lovely to see you, especially if you've got a question for those two. It could make the difference on who is our next Prime Minister, and I'm not over-exaggerating. If you've got a question for one of those two, could make a difference. Who has the keys to number 10? Tomorrow's 2-minute take on what happened yesterday and what might happen today.
Morning, Kay. Well, look, it was scratchy and it was acrimonious last night, but were anyone's minds actually changed by what they heard? Well, we had the familiar arguments on tax, but with a blowtorch under them. Liz Truss saying cut taxes from day one. Rishi Sunak saying no, wait until we've got inflation under control. And there was plenty of personal mudslinging as well about their backgrounds and even their clothing choices. And although towards the end of the debate, they were both trying to be a bit more conciliatory and say that they would serve in each other's governments. Just wanted to show you this tweet that emerged last night from a spokesperson for Liz Truss's campaign, just as she was saying to Rishi Sunak, you know, we've worked nicely together. I'd like you to serve in a government that I lead. A spokesperson for Liz Truss said Rishi Sunak has tonight proven he is not fit for office. What they called his aggressive mansplaining and shouty private school behaviour is desperate, unbecoming and a gift to Labour. So what to make of that? I mean, certainly Rishi Sunak felt like he was on the offensive, that he had ground to make up because we know that he is behind in polls of Tory party members. But it was Liz Truss who was saying to him, you're like Gordon Brown, that's an insult if you're a Tory, and saying that he was peddling Project Fear when he questioned her economic plans. So both of them absolutely adamant that their economic plans are right. Probably we didn't hear as much as we could have done about their plans for anything else like the NHS or the Northern Ireland border or climate change.
Trolling for trolling. We will have more from, I think, Johnny Mercer in the next hour. For now, thanks very much indeed, Tamara. Thank you. Looking at the papers for you now, the Metro focuses on warnings that Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss's attacks on each other could lose the party the next election. Similarly, the Eye declares gloves are off, Tory contest turning nasty. Or nasty, as some people would say, not me. Here's the Times, their headline, bitter Tory rivals get personal. The Telegraph points out one of the key barbs when Liz Truss suggested Rishi Sunak would be similar to Gordon Brown. Just hearing about that from Tamara. According to The Guardian, tax and inflation were the key discussion points. And the Mail focuses on Ms Truss's vow to ensure that strike action by unions causes minimal disruption. There's a new warning this morning about our winter energy bills, that millions of people could be plunged into unimaginable debt if the government doesn't do more to help. Saba has more.
The bills have gone up,
You'll get a kiss for that. You'll get a kiss.
but Keith's routine stays the same. A strain for the Ridley family, now buying less food to meet the needs of their non-verbal autistic son. Accidents mean the washing machine runs up to 10 times a day. But soaring energy bills means this can't go on.
The anguish as a father, not being able to do anything, it really hurts. When your son's having a meltdown and switching on lights, and if you stop him, he goes into a worse, it affects his health. And you're thinking, but that's going to cost money. It shouldn't be the cost of money versus the quality of life. The ball's not in our court, it's out of our hands.
Rising bills have hit low-income families and vulnerable people the hardest. A committee of MPs blames what it calls negligence from the energy watchdog Ofgem for failing to regulate companies. They're calling on the government to urgently revise its current package of support to reflect the rising cost of bills. That, they say, on average is £444 higher each year than what was predicted. They're also calling for investment to insulate homes, which could permanently bring down bills.
The cost of living crisis is getting so bad, and we expect energy bills to go up even further in October and again in January. Many families who are on low incomes are just going to be put in the most heartbreaking and difficult of situations. You'll have more parents not feeding themselves in order to feed their kids.
The Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy has said that no national government can control global inflationary pressures. But it's introduced an extraordinary package of support to help households. And yet the Ridley family still feel left behind, let down as carers, counting the pennies so they can continue to support their children. Saba Chowdhury, Sky News, Milton Keynes.
Still to come on the programme, before you joined by senior Tory MP and former Cabinet Minister David Davis, who's supporting Rishi Sunak for Prime Minister. Speaking to Tory peer, the Lord Norton of Louth, on Boris Johnson's plans to create dozens of peerages before he steps down. And after 8, speaking to the Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, that's James Murray. Now, political leaders have paid tribute to David Trimble, the original First Minister of Northern Ireland and co-architect of the Good Friday Agreement. He's died at the age of 77. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has called him a giant of British and international politics. And the Irish Taoiseach has described his role in negotiating the Good Friday Agreement as crucial and courageous. Joining us now is senior Ireland correspondent David Blevins. Hi, David. It's a very sad day, not just for his family, but for the people of Northern Ireland too.
Yes, David Trimble, I think, will be remembered kindly by history, more kindly than he was treated by his political opponents for the courageous decision he took. He came from a very hard-line unionist position to persuade his party to sit down with Sinn Féin before the IRA had decommissioned weapons, and ultimately that led to the historic Good Friday Agreement. And he went on, as you've said, to become the First Minister of Northern Ireland. He won the Nobel Peace Prize, sharing that, of course, with John Hume, the nationalist leader who was the other architect of the Good Friday Agreement. There have been tributes from right across the political spectrum, Kay, from First Minister-designate Sinn Féin's Michelle O'Neill to the DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. And worth noting that Sir Geoffrey and his predecessor Arlene Foster were among those who parted company with David Trimble and joined the rival Democratic Unionist Party when he signed the Good Friday Agreement. Tributes too from the British and Irish governments and internationally. And I think the the fact that they've come from north, south, east and west speaks for itself about the contribution David Trimble made to the search for peace in Northern Ireland. But I think perhaps the most poignant words this morning have come from Lord MP, who was the chief negotiator for David Trimble's Ulster Unionist Party ahead of the Good Friday Agreement. He says he has no doubt that there are people alive today who would have perished if David Trimble had not had the courage of his convictions. Now that's a tribute.
Yeah. Thank you, David. Also making news for you this morning, Elaine Maxwell has been moved to a low-security prison in Florida. The 60-year-old was found guilty of luring young girls to massage rooms for disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse between 1994 and 2004. According to a prison consulting firm, inmates at the facility in Tallahassee can take part in yoga, an inmate talent show and watch movies. Shifts in alcohol consumption during the pandemic could lead to thousands of extra deaths in England. Two new studies from the Institute of Alcohol Studies and the University of Sheffield show the impact of pandemic-related changes in alcohol consumption on health outcomes. Looking at some of those figures, the report found a 20% rise in alcohol-specific deaths from 2019 to 2020 and says that trend continued throughout last year. The report projects that in a worst-case scenario, by 2035, there'll be around 148,000 additional cases of 9 alcohol-related diseases such as liver cirrhosis and breast cancer. This would cause an additional almost 10,000 premature deaths. This projection will come at a cost to the NHS of £1.2 billion. The University of Sheffield's NHS-funded study examined how alcohol-related hospitalisations and deaths are likely to increase over a longer period of 20 years. The study found that with their worst-case scenario, there'll be about 972,000 additional hospital admissions. This would lead to an extra 25,000 deaths. That would come at a cost to the NHS of £5.2 billion.
We estimate there'll be between nearly 3,000 and 150,000 extra cases of these 9 diseases by 2035, and between 2,500 and 10,000 additional deaths. We also project that this is going to have quite a consequence for the health service as well. So we've projected NHS costs, additional NHS costs, between £363 million and £1.2 billion by 2035.
A trial in people with a high hereditary risk of a range of cancers has shown a major preventative effect from resistant starch food, such as oats, cereal, beans, and slightly green bananas. The study looked at almost 1,000 patients with Lynch syndrome. It's a genetic condition which leads people to be predisposed to a range of cancers. Around 1 in 300 people are a carrier. Who eats green bananas? Now, it's just a few months since the UK launched the Homes for Ukraine visa programme to try to host at least some of the refugees forced to flee their homes. But is the scheme working? Joined now by the former Justice Secretary, Sir Robert Buckland. Hello to you, Sir Robert. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. We have one of your constituents on the programme a little bit later on. She's come here from Ukraine and is now trying to help others come here too. How is the scheme working?
Yes, well, Sofia Volovic, who's on later with UK, is a shining example of how somebody came here in recent months, part of the Homes for Ukraine scheme, and now is helping other people link up with Ukrainian refugees through her own website and her own local organisation called Swindon Welcomes Ukraine. I think the scheme, from a slow start, has been working pretty well. I think there's still a lot more that needs to be done to match up families here in the UK with Ukrainian refugees. And I think it's through initiatives like Sophia's that we will, get that greater pace going. And make sure that as many refugees as possible have that friendly, warm welcome that we all want to give them, bearing in mind the horrific experience that they've been through continues.
Indeed. So how many people... we did promise many tens of thousands of Ukrainians, I'm sure you can give me the exact figure, refugees could come to the UK. How many have come so far? How many more are we expecting? And how long can they stay?
Well, I think, first of all, with regard to the limit of stay, I think it really is open-ended, bearing in mind the fluid nature of what's happening in Ukraine. The exact figure, the up-to-date figure, is not in my head, I'm afraid, Kay. I think it's quite a few tens of thousands. 80,000 comes into my head as the immediate figure, though I can be corrected on that. I think that we've got all these various schemes going, the Homes for Ukraine scheme, the other different schemes that were set up. I think sometimes that can be a bit confusing, and therefore it's really important that all of us, MPs, indeed all local agencies, work out how we can best match up the demand with the supply that we obviously have, and the number of people who have registered is still, I think, well in excess of the actual matches that have been made with regard to accommodation, and that work has got to continue. And just because it was very much in the headlines a few months ago, just because it might not be as much in the headlines as it was, doesn't mean it isn't still important, and that organisations like Sophia's don't have a huge role to play.
There's an awful lot of Home Office red tape there, isn't there, still? We were featuring yesterday 4-year-old Alika Zuberts. She was sent back to Kharkiv after being considered an unaccompanied minor, I should say. She was here with her grandparents, not her parents. And she's now been denied access to the UK twice. We need to sort that out, surely.
Look, Kate, I think that's right. I think clearly in cases like that, the basic humanity of the case should shine through. I'm all for due process and getting things right, but we do need to make those important judgments and have the flexibility to make the value judgments that I think anybody would make in those circumstances, bearing in mind the very young age of that little girl. I think this country's reputation is second to none for our welcoming nature and our generosity to refugees. Ukraine has been an amazing outpouring of love and support, and I see it here in Swindon with local organisations like Sophia's, like the Swindon Humanitarian Aid Partnership that I helped organise here in Swindon. We're just one of many towns and cities across the country that are doing our part to welcome friends in need and to do our part to help, particularly women and children, because it's in the main women and children who are coming here and are separated from their husbands and their sons, who are, of course, in many cases, fighting to defend their homeland.
Let's talk briefly, should we, about the Tory leadership campaign. You are Team Sunak. What do you say to allegations he was mansplaining last night, certainly talking over the other candidate?
Yeah, I think it got lively. What I'm looking for in both leadership candidates is that sense of energy and urgency and purpose. And I think it's good to see that energy from Rishi Sunak. He clearly wants to hit the ground running from day one and get on with a number of priorities. I think in a debate like that, Kay, where you've got differences about how to manage the immediate economy, I want to hear actually that lively exchange. And at times, yes, it can be a bit feisty. I myself can, get feisty in debates as well. But I think that at the end of it all, there was that mutual respect between the two of them that shone through in the last 10 minutes or so. Look, these people who've known each other well, they've sat around the cabinet table, they're capable of having a mature debate. And in fact, the content of the debate, I thought, was pretty good. I'm sure that the Sky debate will provide more insight into their thinking. And let's hope we can get into that sort of quality argument rather than earrings and Prada shoes that I think we got into at one point last night, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, that's certainly what I'm cramming for, and that we'll certainly be asking both sides for clearer understanding on some of those major topics come next Thursday at 8 o'clock here on Sky News. Just before I let you go, sad news about Mr Trimble.
Yes, Lord Trimble was an outstanding leader, a political giant, a Nobel Peace Prize winner. I had the honour of knowing David for a number of years, and Daphne as well, his wife, to whom I send my condolences. This was a man who came from a very strong unionist tradition, but then who put peace first. and he reached out to his opponents because he wanted to see peace in his beloved Northern Ireland. And he, with others on the other side of the debate, the sectarian divide, achieved that in the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. And we owe David a huge debt of gratitude. And I think back with great sadness today that I won't see my friend again, but great pride about what he achieved, not just for Northern Ireland, but for our country and indeed the wider world.
David Davis is with us here in the studio. We've just been chewing the cud during the break, supporting Rishi Sunak. How did your man do?
Very well. I think he...
Are you sure?
Yeah. I mean, he had some very, very important points. The biggest point of the debate, really, was the clash over taxes. Now, I'm a low-tax Tory, but the policy that Liz wants to pursue, in the words of our own economist, will push the base rate up to 7%. Now, in ordinary speak for everybody, me and the others, if the base rate's 7%, mortgage rates are 8, 9, 10%, quadruple what they are now. The impact on my children...
He didn't believe... He said that that's just speculation.
Speculation?
Yeah.
No, it's not true. I mean, look, the simple truth is that if you are going to expand the demand economy, you have to do something about inflation. Inflation's running away. I mean, for all sorts of reasons, which are not anybody's fault. You know, oil prices, the effect of COVID and so on. But if they have to control it solely by that, it's going to be a huge increase in interest costs, and that's going to hit everybody's mortgage. I mean, the generation rent is going to be devastated by that, the ones who have houses, you know. So it's, you know, I think that was by far and away the most powerful point on the day. I mean, it was quite a fierce debate, as you'd expect, but...
Who's not going to vote for a cut in taxes, though? You know, people, the 150, 160,000 members, if they think they're going to get a cut in their taxes, then they go, oh, yeah, I'm going to put my ex there.
Well, except if they think they or their children are going to face crippling mortgage costs. I mean, we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, and what's been talked about here is quadrupling one of the biggest costs you have in your daily life. I mean, one of the reasons, well, the primary reason, frankly, why I'm supporting Rishi is, you know, I've seen loads of these. I mean, I've probably seen more of these.
You've been part of these?
I've been part of a couple of them. I've seen more of these than anybody else. And we spend a lot of time electing people for one crisis and then they're destroyed by another crisis. The biggest exception, there are a few exceptions, the biggest exception is the person who keeps being referred to it. This is Margaret Thatcher. Why? Because she had the character to deal with it. She had the courage, she had the consistency of principles, she had the intellect to deal with it. And what I'm looking for is that. You know, now, look at what happened. Look at the arguments over Brexit. Rishi, back in 2016, he stood up for Brexit when it was the career-destroying thing to do, when David Cameron made it plain, if you stand up for Brexit, your career's over. Liz may well have believed in Remain, but she took the route, the easier route.
Oh, yeah, but we're all Brexiteers now.
Well, wait a minute, but I'm not judging the issue on Brexit. It's a perfectly reasonable thing to have a difference of view on. What I'm judging is who took the hard decision. At that point, Rishi took the hard decision. In the middle of the COVID crisis, we had the best recovery, the best economic policy in the world, IMF's description, not mine. Why? Because he did the work and made the tough decisions early. Now he's defending, again, the less popular policy because it's the one he thinks is right.
Was our economy going to be, as part of the G20 next year? I mean, the lowest growth apart from Russia next year.
Yeah, because we've been hit hard by oil prices.
Everybody has.
Yeah, but, you know, this differs between countries, the impact of it. So you're right. She's taking the more populist policy, and Rishi's taking the tougher policy. You know, both compare themselves to Thatcher. Look back and see what Thatcher did early on. She took the tough policies that delivered on the day, and that's what he's doing.
OK, last night, during the debate, one of Liz Truss's supporters tweeted to say that Rishi Sunak, I'm not sure if he tweeted or made a statement, Rishi Sunak was unfit for government.
On what basis? I mean,
I don't know. What did you say in response?
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand that at all. I mean, look, there's lots of spin goes on around these things. I mean, we've both seen that over the years, and people spin what they think is important. It was a strong argument. But you know, if you watched David Cameron and I having debates on television, 5 debates on television, I was just as tough on him as those debates were last night.
Yeah, he wasn't very elegant about it, though. That's the problem.
Sorry?
He wasn't very elegant about it last night.
Well, I think he's passionate about these issues. He cares about it. I mean, you know, he really does care about the fact that, you know, either us or our children will face phenomenal costs on this policy. You know, absolutely life-destroying costs. You'd have to sell your house, you'd have to move out. That sort of thing is important, and it's important to him. And I think it actually reflects well on him that he's that passionate about the policy.
Why is he not able to get those points across as eloquently as you just have?
Oh, it's in the middle of a debate. I mean, it's, you know, and it was quite important at that point in the debate that the idea that some sort of easy, very low tax policy, a giveaway policy to everybody, didn't just fly free. It's very important. Sometimes it's important to intervene in debates. When we're in the Commons, you know, we have these comparatively fierce exchanges lots of times, all the time. Nobody expects any quarter in that. It's an important way of getting to the truth, of challenging people. You have to challenge things when they're wrong, and he thought that was wrong.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be left to people like Sophie to say shush and let the lady make her point. He was talking over, and some describe it as mansplaining. Doesn't want to be in a position where he's being viewed as some sexist bloke who's talking over people.
Well,
and that's how he came across last night.
Well, we differ on that. I mean, look, as I said, when I had exchange with Cameron, I was just as forensic and difficult with him as Rishi was last night. Nobody accused... I don't know what you'd accuse me of for picking apart Cameron's arguments, but, you know, nobody accused me of anything untoward. And I don't think the rules should be that different if it's a man to woman, if it's a man to man, or a woman to woman. Yeah. You know? I mean, Mrs.
I mean, it's not my view how he came across, but that's what we're reading about in the papers.
Well, that's the spin. I mean, look, the first candidate I supported was Penny Mordaunt. She was the receipt of vicious briefing throughout. Most of it came from Liz's camp, not her herself, but David Frost or Anne-Marie Trevelyan, people like that. You know, we don't complain about that. You know, this is a debate to find the Prime Minister of this country. Facing a time when the decisions are going to be really tough. You know, we've already got energy, economy and Ukraine on the crisis list, but we're going to have others. We're going to have issues with the National Health Service, other big issues coming up. We need the person who, A, knows what he stands for, B, is courageous enough to take the difficult decisions, and C, determined enough to do it. Okay, and that's Rishi Sunak.
But perception is reality, and the perception from last night, both from the Truss camp and also reading in the newspapers this morning, is that he didn't come across very well. Whatever his policies are, he didn't come across very well. So given that you are I'm going to describe you as a veteran of these things, what's your advice to him ahead of our debate next week?
Oh, I think, you know, I think he should still make the arguments. Look, I had the actual audience he's aiming at in terms of winning the contest. I mean, he's aiming at the whole country, of course, but the actual audience he's aiming at winning the contest. It's not the spin doctors in the spin room afterwards. The audience he's aiming at is the Conservative Party in the country. I had three of my own members text me in the middle of it last night, about two-thirds of the way through, halfway to two-thirds of the way through, because they were surprised when I told them I was supporting Sunak. They thought I'd support Truss. And they came back and said, we can see why. Now, so it's not everybody takes the view that was put around in the spin room.
No, but you say he's aiming himself at Tory voters or Tory members. That's what the audience was made up of last night, and he didn't win the audience either. Well,
we'll see what it is for the whole Tory party. We're talking about 160,000 people. My ones thought he did well. You know.
OK. What does he have to do to win?
Well, he has to cease to be the second favourite and become the favourite.
Indeed. And how does he do that?
Well, I think he's got to win the arguments, you know, and the arguments that matter, which is why the 7% matters. That's why that matters. It's very important. I mean, the Tory party, generally speaking, is a bit older than average. It's a little bit more middle class, but not so much these days, but a little bit more middle class. It will care about things like their offspring having to face these sorts of interest rates in the future. So that matters. He also has to get across to them that he's a great believer in the country. The Tories are a very patriotic party. So is Rishi, and he's shown it by the tough decisions he had to take.
OK. It's very good of you to put a tie on for me this morning, if I might say so.
And my teeth are working as well. And I didn't have to run a mile to get here.
Last time we saw you, you'd just come back from the dentist, hadn't you?
That's right.
And you were somewhat more relaxed.
Well, I'm relaxed today.
I'm glad to hear it. You're always welcome. Thanks for joining us
Real
on
pleasure,
the programme. Thank you. Let's take you to Canada, though, should we? Actually, we will, of course, be hearing from Truss supporters throughout the course of the programme. Before that, though, Pope Francis, he's apologised for generations of abuse and cultural suppression at Catholic residential schools across the country. Thousands of Indigenous people travelled to the small Alberta prairie community of Musquatchees to hear the long-awaited apology. Here's Sally.
The Pope's welcome was warm, but this visit was about repairing deep wounds. At the site of a former Catholic residential school, where for decades Indigenous children were separated from their parents, abused and neglected. Finally, the words Canada's Indigenous community has sought for generations.
Me encuentro entre ustedes.
I am here because the first step of my penitential pilgrimage among you is that of again asking forgiveness, of telling you once more that I am deeply sorry.
At least 150,000 Indigenous children were forced into church-run schools in Canada. Malnutrition was rife. Children were physically and sexually abused. The last of these institutions only closed in the 1990s, and many survivors came to hear the apology in person.
I've waited 50 years for this apology, and finally today, I heard it. And unfortunately, a lot of my family members, friends, classmates, and members of my community that went to residential school were not able to hear it because they had passed on through suicide, alcohol addiction.
Hundreds of unmarked graves have been found near former homes, where children died at rates several times above the national average. The Pope's apology won't heal their losses and trauma, but it's the acknowledgement they've long sought that the Church was complicit in their abuse. Sally Lockwood, Sky News, Washington.
Boris Johnson said to be preparing a bumper resignation honours list, including swelling the ranks of peers. It's been reported he's considering appointing dozens of Tories to the House of Lords when he leaves number 10. Joining us now, Tory peer and constitutional expert Lord Norton of Louth. Hi, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Why would he do this?
Well, there's a view that the government needs to increase its numbers so it can have a majority when votes take place in the Lords. So that seems to be the prompt for it. The problem with it, or problems, is simply it will enhance the size of the Lords. So there's a numbers aspect. There's also a qualitative aspect in terms of the process by which they're being nominated. It's not that transparent. And there's also a political issue because it is, as you mentioned, a Conservative list. So it's not increasing peers in all parts of the House. It would increase the ranks of the government benches quite considerably, which already has quite a lead over the opposition. So the future general election, say whether to be a Labour government, you then have a problem of the government needing to increase its support in the House, which would just further swell the ranks of the sheer size of the House. At the moment, the government's got a lead of almost 100 over the Labour benches.
But he wouldn't be the first Prime Minister to pack the Lords with his bodies as he leaves office, would he?
No, he wouldn't. You're quite right. This is not a new problem. It's an exacerbation of a problem which some of us have been drawing attention to for some time, the sheer increase in the number of peers. And we've been pressing for a reduction. It's a few years ago now that the House actually passed a motion without a vote. We were unanimous in this view that the House was already too large, that the number should be reduced and steps should be taken to reduce our numbers. I mean, our general view is that the House of Lords should certainly be no bigger than the House of Commons. And following the House of Lords Act of 1999, which got rid of most hereditary peers, the size of the House was roughly the same as that of the House of Commons. Since then, the numbers have increased quite substantially. So you're quite right. It's not specific to the present Prime Minister. It's a continuation of a problem that we've recognised for some time.
You're trying to do something about it with the private members bill?
I am. That's to address particularly the process by which peers are nominated. As you know, at the moment, there's the House of Lords Appointments Commission. It can advise, but it is purely advisory. It's a non-departmental public body. Prime Minister can make whatever recommendations he wishes to the Crown, if necessary, ignore the advice given by the Commission. I've got a private members bill that's designed to put the Commission on a statutory basis, to create criteria for the appointment of peers, so that they would have to reach a very high level of quality and also be willing to contribute to the work of the House. And the Commission itself could add further criteria in determining the nature of appointments, including having regard to the diversity of the population of the United Kingdom. And the Prime Minister would not be able to make a nomination until he'd received that advice. And furthermore, the bill prescribes that the Prime Minister or any party leader making nominations would have to inform the Commission of the process and the criteria by which those names have been selected, as well as supplied the Commission with any further information that the Commission requires. So there'd be much greater transparency in the process as well.
OK, and I think I'm right in saying, my Lord, that the Leader of the House of Lords has written to our future Prime Minister, whichever of the two eventually win, to ask them to show restraint when they get into power and eventually are leaving office, whenever that might be. It's great for you to come on to explain that to us this morning. We very much appreciate you taking the time, my Lord. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Thank you.